Alright guys, welcome back again. Every time I hear that sound, I keep thinking it's Phil Collins. But I was very brave about it. You can rest assured of that. Pruning is just as much my responsibility as a chronicler's cataloging, wouldn't you agree? What is important about this ordeal is that I was actually quite courageous and did not make any sort of scene at all. I got dressed alongside everyone else and we departed the baths without incident. Incident, however, was not too far away. As we passed the rectory on the way to the cloister, Moira gently grabbed my wrist. Ah, Hedwig, why don't we go in here? Whatever for? I have something I want to show you. In the rectory? We should go in. I was completely bewildered. The pair positioned themselves on either side of me and pushed me toward the steps up to the large wooden door. Oh no, I thought. This is it. They knew I'm nosing around about Catherine's death. They were in cahoots. They were going to have me killed. No, I think I'd like to stay outside if that's all the same to you. Stop wiggling. Let's just go inside. It won't take a moment. Excuse me. No, thank you. What are you two doing? I'll scream. Alright, where'd they take me? I was pushed through the large wooden doors. I stumbled backward into the room, bumping my backside into a chair that I held on to stay upright. Gingerly, I turned around then. Took you long enough. A crowd was gathered around the rectory table, which was itself so laden with food I could scarcely believe it hadn't buckled. Everyone present was smiling widely, and I felt reassured at the very least that I was not about to be murdered in a dark room. Welcome back, Hedwig. How was the village? It was a valuable experience. I'm glad to hear it. What is all this? A few days ago, some of the sisters approached me with a reminder that St. Cecilia's feast day was approaching. Which, if I'm not mistaken, would be the feast day closest to your date of birth, yes? I think so. I never had much need to track my birthdays whilst I was in Anchorus. Christmas was my mental marker for the passage of time. Although, once I thought about it, I did remember receiving a more handsomely prepared meal once every autumn, for a few years when I was still a child in my cell. Your friend suggested we celebrate. I must admit, St. Cecilia's Day is one that we have often neglected to mark with a proper feast day, but we all agreed it would be appropriate to throw a little bash for you. And for her saintliness, of course. I don't know what to say. Start with thanks and we can go from there. Everyone chuckled. I smiled graciously even though Darcy's remark felt far more cutting than she likely intended. How rude of me. Thank you. Thank you all, very much. Everyone murmured appreciatively in response and moved toward their seats. Moira patted me in the back as she walked to her seat with a twinkle in her eye. Everyone began plating food from the generous piles of poultry, fish, and vegetables in front of them. I thought I recognized some of the carrots I had helped Darcy harvest not long ago. A plump roast duck sat in the center of the table. It all looked and smelled delicious. I apologized for the little ruse. Moira suggested the surprise. Guilty. Everyone here contributed a little, however. Isn't that right? I do believe it was my general idea at first, if we're collecting accolades. Yes, but I remembered the feast day. Darcy somehow found time to direct the preparation of this meal and bake those wonderful fritters of hers to take to the village. Speaking of, did any of those make it back? Oh, no, we gave everything away. A shame, but not a surprise. I'm sure the town couldn't get enough of them. We all helped in the kitchen too. Ah, I was distracted for a moment. Yes, Margaret, Adela, and Flora all graciously helped prepare the meal while you were in the baths. Which, let us not forget, I had drawn beforehand. That wasn't a spontaneous suggestion on Mara's part. This is also elaborate. Nobody has ever done anything like this for me before. And don't you forget it. Another chuckle went around the whole table. I smiled weakly. Tears were welling up behind my eyes. Marta and I had the very important duty of taste testing. That's right. And guess who set the table? Thank you all very much. I could feel everyone staring at me expectantly. This is really wonderful. I choked my words out, overcome with too many emotions at once. Mercifully, being on the verge of sobbing past a simple gratitude to everyone else present. I was thankful, but I was also confused, anxious, hurt, terrified. As I mentioned, too many things at once. I did not deserve any of this. I was not anyone's friend. I was a liar and a sneak. A dog set loose in the coop to root out a fox. I gawked across the table at the superior, who smiled back at me. I found it incredible that nobody got caught in the puppet strings connecting her and I as they reached between us for food. And as it's St. Cecilia's feast day, I will be performing a little composition of mine in the chapel after our meal concludes. If anyone would like to join me for a rehearsal beforehand, I would appreciate the assistance. Margaret? Catherine? I'd rather... There's nowhere we'd rather be, but I do think we have some urgent matters to attend to once this is over. Urgent? Well, we were helping prepare all of this for most of the day. I have some important tasks I set aside. It was my pleasure, just so you know, Hedwig. Of course. Well, if it's urgent, of course you may be excused. Since when is anything around here urgent? Ow! Fleur glared at Catherine, who maintained an utterly innocent expression. To everyone else, barring any emergencies, you are invited and encouraged to assist. Either way, we must all convene in the chapel later. This was met with a ripple of non-committal murmuring. I could tell the food was excellent, as was to be expected. But as I ate, I felt I was sitting next to myself. I could not taste the juicy duck or rich gravy. I cannot read today, guys. I was having it described to me secondhand. Everything I could taste, smell, hear, and see felt like it wasn't really there. Are you feeling well, Sister Hedwig? Oh, my apologies. I have had a long day. What was it like going down to the village? That must have been quite an adventure for you. It was... I'm afraid I did not adjust to the experience as well as I could have. It was all a bit stressful, but I think she'll do better next time. Perhaps a picnic or some such. Yes, we more or less come up with the same idea, didn't we, Hedwig? That's right. Wonderful news. I do apologize for the stressful assignment, Hedwig. It was the best I could come up with on short notice. She took a sip of wine, but kept her eyes on me. Well, I suppose it was all worth it for this. Hear, hear. Although I'm not sure. I was not sure I was worth all this trouble. I'm not sure how I can repay you all for this. You've all been very kind and well, you didn't have to repay us for any of this. Absolutely not. That isn't the point. If you really must feel like you're doing something for us in turn, you could keep your self-flagellation to a minimum. You could indulge us in some questions about yourself. You've been out of that little cell for weeks, and now I still don't feel like I know you as well as I should. That's a fantastic idea, if she's up to it. No escape. I'll do my best. In that case, where are you from? Germany is where I was born, but I don't remember anything about it. I suppose you could say, I'm from here? You do not remember anything about where you were born? There is very little I can recall about my life before I took my oaths, I'm afraid. Is there anything at all you can remember? Any particular places? Your parents? No. I don't have any recollections of my mother or father. Crumbs, there's no need to apologize. I just can't imagine what that's like. Don't listen to her, Hedwig. That sounds positively blissful. Hedwig von Limbarrow. I do remember one thing, I think. It's hard to know, in fact, if it's a memory at all. But it is the very least something I know I could never have picked up in my cell. Everyone leaned forward slightly. I remember the smell of the ocean. That's all? For the most part. There are little bits and pieces I associate with that smell if I try my hardest to recall, but nothing substantial. I was just about to say the smell of the ocean is one of my strongest memories as well. You and I have more in common than I expected, Sister Hedwig. Can you speak any other languages? I don't think so. My grasp of our own language leaves much to be desired. I'm not sure a second one would find purchase in my head. Perhaps you could forget a few phrases like find purchase to make room? Catherine. I remember the saltiness of the sea, and if I try hard enough, I think I could describe the sound of waves. But beyond that, my earliest memories are, well, the office of the dead. Ah, how beautiful. Bit morbid for a first memory. I don't find it morbid. It's a very comforting memory, actually. The bishop read it for you, I presume. I would have liked to have witnessed that. It was before my time. 20 years ago, I had just taken my vows at Borna Grove. Yes, All in all, I remember it being quite a moving ceremony. That's lovely. I'm glad it's a positive memory for you. After that, it's mostly becomes a blur. Not in a bad way, it's more like the rest of my life until now, very recently. Up until very recently, it was one long meditation. Things tend to move faster and slower all at once in a small place, don't they? No? Time's the same as always, I think. That makes a fair bit of sense to me, actually. It only describes how I felt after moving here. Which reminds me, how are my old stomping grounds, Hedwig? Did anyone mention me? She shot me an oddly piercing look. No, I'm afraid not. A shame. I'm sure the place is falling apart without me. The grapes they've been sending up to us haven't been tasting as good ever since you left. You know what? I think you're right. Eat. We must let all this food go to waste, and we're due in the chapel for the little recital. Everyone groaned and the table-wide conversation dissipated as the sisters ate their fill. My stomach was rather uneasy. I tried to eat as much of it, admittedly, delicious meal as I could, but I could not keep up with any of the others. I watched the others eat as I picked at my own plate. I couldn't help but notice that Angela was not present. I was not surprised that an event even partially in my honor did not interest her. I was inclined to agree with Angela's assessment. I was not worth this level of pageantry. As I forced the last bits of food down my throat, all I could think of was the disappointment Moira would feel as soon as she entered the dorms. Her unwarranted kindness towards me would dissipate instantly as soon as she realized what had happened. I looked across the table at her innocent smiling face. She would hate me the instant she truly knew me. The piles of food slowly wore down to nothing. Conversation began to start back up again, albeit quieter, calmer. Everyone, it seemed, was at peace after this decadent meal in my name. I'll never get tired of your cooking, Darcy. Thanks, I'll never get tired of doing it. Thank goodness for that. Really good work, Darce. Everyone chimed in with murmured agreement, even Flora, who looked uncharacteristically content. It was a lovely meal, Darcy. Thank you, everyone. If you would all excuse me, I must go and prepare for the recital while this gets cleaned up. Would you assist me, Hedwig? Yes, Superior. On our own feast day? What'd she do to deserve this? More than Catherine could know. I don't mind. In truth, I couldn't wait to be free of the crowded rectory, if only for a few minutes. I gave the sisters a polite bow of my head and followed the Superior out of the room. The rain had ceased just as our meal had concluded. We walked briskly along the path between the rectory and the chapel. The evening air was cool and pleasant after the rain, although dark clouds were still threatening above us. The Superior seemed oddly tense as we approached the large doors. Somehow, I knew nobody would volunteer to help me in the chapel, but it made for a good show, don't you think? Nobody would suspect a thing. My apologies, Superior, but I have no idea what you mean. She did not reply. The Superior held open the heavy chapel door for me and ushered me inside. I obliged, and then let out an embarrassing yelp as I saw two people waiting for me inside. One was large and stately. I did not recognize him. The other... It's about time. My apologies, Sister Angela. Angela had been sitting in a pew near the altar, but she had risen to meet us as soon as the door opened. There was no mistaking her lanky form even in the dim evening light. The person sitting next to her, however... Sister Hedwig. You have met this man before, although you may not recognize him. Bishop Richard. I wish we could be meeting under more pleasant circumstances, my child, but it is nonetheless a pleasure to see you in the flesh once more. It is an honor to meet you. Again. Mr. This is His Excellency Richard Bell, the Bishop of Carlisle. My goodness, my apologies, Your Grace. The portly man gently waved away my apology. Worry not. I have met no one else in a situation as unique as yours. I realize this must all be very strange to you. He knows? Yes. I briefed both him and Angela on the extent of our investigation this afternoon. I cannot believe it. I gulped at Angela, who made a point of looking straight past me. My travels brought me here a little earlier than expected. Such a tragic situation, I felt I should be more present than my usual monthly visit for the sacrament allows. I'll be here for just over a week to offer counsel to the grieving, and our investigation shall continue apace. The man sighed heavily. I appreciate your diligence, but it sounds to me as if you're staring the answer in the face and refusing to believe it. I do not think it's that simple. I believe, as does Hedwig after our own extensive research, that James Foreman is innocent, which would mean one of your charges is a murderer. How could you even entertain such a ghastly idea? Call it one of my hunches. Have I been wrong before? Mabel, come now. Have I? What have your other hunches been? I told you that I had a bad feeling about building a clock tower onto the side of the chapel was a foolish idea. And lo and behold, it fell down not a month into construction. A lucky guess. I have a storied career of lucky guesses then, Your Excellency. Before I was appointed abbess, this place was on death's doorstep. I have cultivated and pruned it into a garden. A simple one perhaps, but a garden nonetheless. I do not mean to insult you, Mabel. In fact, it is my respect for your work that gives me such pause. How could I believe that one of the sisters you preside over, many of whom came into the church under your selection, would be capable of such a thing? The superior did not have an answer for this. I recalled that I could hear her teeth grinding in the ensuing silence. I do applaud your ingenuity in recognizing that Hedwig here would be an impartial observer, but it seems to me this whole situation has gotten out of hand. Please forgive this hypocritical dear sister, but why is Angela part of this trusted circle now? I would like to know that I too believe James Foreman is guilty. I am just entertaining your superior's logic for a moment, if you will allow me. Of course. Well, Mabel, Hedwig, I understand, but what places Angela above suspicion? Sister Angela is my prior. It would be impossible as well as unethical for me to continue to keep this investigation from her. She found James and accused him to begin with. I should like to put her belief through its paces. She is to be your successor, indeed. And while I disagree with her position on Mr. Foreman's alleged crime, I love and respect her. See, that's the thing also. I'm like, the moment you brought her in, I'm like, why? Now she's in the know. For all you know, she might be the guilty party, but we will never find that out now because she's gonna find ways to, go around it. If she is guilty, that is. It should have just been the bishop and the superior. I would like this to be a learning experience for her. My dearest Mabel, I know you love and respect all of your nuns. Why then must you believe that one of them is a killer? And why couldn't it be Angela? The superior and Angela looked at each other. Angela grimaced. Well, grimaced more prominently than usual. I can account for all my movements the night Catherine was murdered. I'm sure everyone here can. And they can be vouched for. Oh. Angela was in my office the likeliest time of Catherine's slaying. In your office. Complaining. I was vigorously arguing against the misapplication of yet more of the Abbey's funds. And requesting action be taken against some of our sisters' poor behavior. There might have been more items on my list. It is my responsibility as prior to check the superior when I sense things are wrong. Nobody could possibly overlook your diligence. You mean to tell me that her alibi is that she was arguing with you long enough to be sure she was not involved? Forgive me, but that sounds rather unbelievable. The superior and I exchanged a glance. Angela looked away and exhaled sharply. It's true. All eyes turned to me. As ludicrous as the story has sounded, I thought back to my conversation with the superior in her office. Those walls and that door were thick. As angry as it made me to imagine Catherine's death being overlooked by the Abbey's authorities simply because they were bickering, it was all too plausible. That is... believable, actually. My goodness. I'll do my best to stay on your good side, Sister Angela. I'll keep that in mind, Your Excellency. Why didn't you tell me this before? Either of you. I had hoped to inform you last night as it happens. I thought back to the event of the previous evening. Angela had indeed said something to me before leaving the Misericorde, or rather, before she was practically chased out by Catherine. My understanding of these events suddenly felt a little clearer. It certainly explained why Catherine bristled so much at Angela's presence. Did Catherine perhaps detect an ulterior motive in Angela? The same motive that so far nobody had detected in me? I made the decision very recently. The day before yesterday, in fact. It has been conspicuous enough to have you emerge from your cell and start poking around to these horrific events. Two of you at once would have been a touch obvious, I should think. I would have refused to do it. And now? Now it would seem I have no choice, Your Excellency. We are in a strange situation to be sure. But I think between us, we can make sure justice is done. I will stay out of your way. I do not wish to involve myself in any investigation. It feels rather wrong for me to be anything but an impartial visitor. Of course. However, if anything suspicious is told to you throughout the course of your counseling... Suspicious? Where would the line be? I believe I'm giving you ample leeway to deal with the situation the way you see fit. I can think of a precious few members of the diocese that would accept your actions in this situation, let alone grant you the freedom to make half the decisions you have made in the first place. I understand. Removing an anchorage from her cell is such a unique course of action I would not even know where to begin explaining it to the Archbishop. I'm not sure there's even a precedent on the books for how you might be punished if the situation came to light. I hope for all of our sakes that your radical decision here at least yields some results. If they did, I might have an easier time preventing you from being excommunicated. Or worse. I felt a lump building in my throat. I had been so preoccupied with my own fragile situation at the Abbey that I hadn't even considered the wider world of the church politicking. We will solve this mystery, and I will be vindicated. I truly hope so. England is at war with itself, and the last thing the church needs is to appear weak and ineffectual. It must be a beacon at all times, a standard for the world to live up to. We will not fail. Very well. There was a moment of silence as we all collected ourselves. The spirit looked grimmer than I had ever seen her. She breathed deeply and seemed to stare right through the bishop, who was offering Angela and I an apologetic smile. Nobody spoke. There was little else to add, I suppose. The bishop turned to the superior, his mood suddenly cheerful. I understand that you are performing in a moment. It would be an honor to attend. Yes. Yes, of course. She snapped out of her dark expression. We have just had a feast day for Saint Cecilia, and I shall be performing a short composition in our honor. How delightful. Angela and Hedwig, I would like you two to meet with me in my office once we're done here. I would like you two to share your... Oh, hello. Am I still too early? No. Come in, take a seat. Oh, man. I don't know. That was a little too well-timed for my own good. I feel like she's in the know. I won't say she's guilty, but she's in the know. She knows something. Or she might be guilty of something else. Either way, it's not good. Catherine's smile evaporated when she saw Angela and I standing together. She looked away and busied herself with the doorstep so the rest of the sisters could flow in. Everyone else trickled behind her. I noticed Margaret hanging back to whisper something to Catherine, who reacted to whatever Margaret had told her with an expression of bewilderment. She shook her head and shrugged. Margaret looked oddly panicked, but whatever Catherine meant with that gesture seemed to put her mildly at ease. I was just about to turn away when her eyes met with mine. I whirled away, hoping she did not feel as if I had been spying on her. The gaggle of nuns that had entered the chapel was haphazardly morphing into an orderly line to greet the bishop, who was standing near the front of the room. He had put on a hat in the intervening moments and looked much grander all of a sudden. Behind him, the spirit fiddled with the portative organ. People were bowing to the bishop and kissing his ring gently. I realized that I had failed to properly greet him in this manner when I first entered the room and quickly joined the line. How far gone was I to forget how to adjust my betters? It had only been a few short weeks since I had left my cell after all. I was standing behind Catherine in line. Darcy was speaking to the bishop ahead of us. She scarcely had to stoop to plant her lips on the ring, and she did so without saying anything. Catherine stepped up as Darcy glided away. Katrina, my darling. You look healthy. This place has done you good, hasn't it? I can't complain. The bishop chuckled and wagged a finger at her before extending his hand for her to kiss. She bent low and took his hand in hers as she planted her lips on the golden band. She stepped away. I walked up to the bishop hesitantly, expecting to be admonished. I can't say I've ever had this happen before. Is this a first for both of us, Your Excellency? Indeed. He chuckled. I was not joking. He held out his hand. My lips felt dry in the cool air of the chapel, but even in my sorry state, I could not let myself wet them with my tongue in front of this man. I bent down to kiss the ring. As soon as my mouth touched the metal, I realized I had no idea what to do. I bounced off awkwardly. I stood back up to face the bishop, hoping that it had not been as unpleasant an experience for him as it had been for me. He simply smiled and waved me off. Ah, Margaret. How have you been faring? It is complicated, Your Excellency. I moved out of earshot and took a seat next to Moira. She had eagerly scooted aside to accommodate me as soon as she saw me leaving the line to greet the bishop. Everyone was seated eventually, all save for the superior and the bishop. The bishop stood off to the side of the altar as the superior adjusted her instrument. She cleared her throat and addressed the chapel. "Hello, everyone. I don't mean to keep you all waiting, but I am experiencing some problems with the organ." She pressed a few keys, the portative wheezed and sputtered, but did not produce whatever sound the superior was hoping for. Well, she began to play a tune. The instrument was not up to the task. One more try. Perhaps if I could feel Moira sinking in her seat next to me. Oh no. There we are. La. No, well, forget it. There was an echoing clunk as something inside the contraption shifted. Miraculously, the organ sputtered to life. A hushed voice from behind startled me. It could have been much worse, believe me. She's trying her best. I do not wish to be unkind, so I will simply say that I am grateful that the superior shared her passion with us with such enthusiasm. When the performance finally ended, there was a smattering of applause. The superior gave her audience an odd little curtsy in response. The bishop awakened with a jolt and hastily started clapping along with us. I looked over at Moira, who was smiling sheepishly. She stood up as the clapping died down. I tucked my knees to let her pass. She walked up to the altar to speak to the superior, clearly offering some congratulations directly. The voice from behind muttered in my ear again. "We are all getting together to throw a real celebration in the cellars later tonight." Another voice whispered in my other ear. "Much later tonight. Midnight, in fact." I shuddered. Catherine was the last person I wanted to spend time with after midnight, but I wasn't sure refusal was an option from the tone of their voices. "What sort of celebration?" "Your feast day, of course. But also a proper wake for Sister Catherine II. Something up the old chronicler, and welcoming the new one, properly." With a gulp, I nodded slowly. "That's a lot of celebrating for one day, but that's the spirit. You'll manage. You will come, correct?" Yes." I heard the two of them stand up. Catherine patted me on the shoulder and squeezed hard. Her nails dug into my skin through my robe for just an instant. I'm looking forward to it. I was not enjoying this new relationship that had evolved between Catherine and myself. In retrospect, I wondered if our shared secret was driving her to attempt to be earnestly friendly with me in her own unique way. But I think it is equally as likely that she was taking some kind of sick pleasure in taunting me, even though what I knew of her liaison, were I the kind of woman to spread rumor, surely had her in check. As I left the chapel, I noticed Angela standing outside waiting for me. My heart sank. I might have opted for another hour of portative organ recital over this meeting. The superior says we should have this discussion ourselves. The rest of the sisters passed us by. Once they were out of earshot, Angela continued. "She is busy and trusts me to get what I need out of you. And it might be suspicious if all three of us started taking meetings with her in the office. Yes, if I had not just explained the exact reasoning to you already, that would be a reasonable guess. Shall we walk?" "Either way." She turned around and set off down the path to the garden. "Tell me what you know." "There's really not much to tell you yet." "You've had almost 3 weeks. What have you been doing?" "Well, I have had to adjust to a new life, and I have been doing my utmost to not raise suspicions." "I must confess I don't understand why it has taken you so long to adjust, as you put it. The way the superior told it to me, you positively jumped at the chance to leave your cell." "That is not true." She turned to me incredulous. "Really now? I was practically forced out. I would have much rather stayed. Why would I willingly break such a sacred vow? One that I held for almost 20 years. It's true that I was moved by the superior's cause, but if there was a way I could have helped without leaving my cell, I would have chosen it. I imagine an alternate path, one where I maintained my life as an anchoress, while the superior brought me information to judge impartially, and became very angry at myself. If I had fought for myself, perhaps I could have solved this ghastly crime and had not my life's work thrown away. Interesting. Do you believe me? I can certainly see the superior glossing over some details in her zeal. She had already unlocked my door by the time I had a chance to protest. That does sound like her. Impulsive. Bullheaded. No wonder she has such a fascination with Catherine's death. Do you not share that interest? Did Catherine earn some scorn somehow? Catherine earned plenty of scorn, but that's not what I meant. I just mean that despite all their differences, she and Catherine shared a similar distaste for simple answers. It felt very strange talking to Angela this candidly. I would not describe her as being any more friendly than usual.